This is lesson number 6 in our journey in the book of Deuteronomy. What I found out today is you really need to read Leviticus and Numbers to get the full understanding of Deuteronomy, because sometimes you'll see references to certain passages in either one of those books, and you get more of an explanation, such as how Aaron died.
Oh,
That was in, yeah, I don't know if that was in Leviticus or Numbers, but he had disobeyed God, and he was Moses' brother. And so God directed that he go up to a mountain, and he was stripped of all of his, I guess, armor or whatever in front of the people.
oh,
So the whole congregation saw him. And after the last one was stripped from him, he died.
oh.
So that sounds brutal, but he the way he disobeyed God was that he pretended to be God, and that's just a real mortal sin, as the Catholics say. Okay, I want to go back to something that I never ever thought of, that the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness for 40 days. And it never occurred to me, well, how are they going to change clothes? And perhaps how they're going to wash their clothes, over this period of time, 40 days. Oh, no, 40 years, not days. Yes.
Right.
I don't have but one piece of clothing that's at least 40 years old. And maybe I could wear it now since I lost a little weight, but it's a jacket that I bought in 1970. So it's good and old. But if you're going to be walking around for 40 years, your shoes are going to fall apart. Everything is going to fall apart. When I went to Cuba, the people were so poor that every night they would wash their underwear. And they made a clothesline, and they had clothespins, something we probably don't even sell here. And they would hang the underwear on the clothesline.
Wow.
Yeah. And what we did was we just left everything we did not wear while we were there, and we left our luggage. And told them they could get whatever they wanted. Plus, the church, St. Gabriel's, sent several pieces of luggage full of clothes in all sizes for the women. So that was a really good mission trip for the church. But in Deuteronomy, I think it's 4:8 or 8:4. So it's one of those. God tells them, the Israelites, that I'm going to preserve your clothes while you are here. And so, boy, I never thought about, well, whether they changed. Did they bring some clothes with them? I don't know. When they left Egypt, it was so fast. I know they ran out. But the passage says that your clothes will not be worn or really, I'm saying messed up during these 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
It's chapter 8:4,
8:4, okay.
verse 4.
Okay, and what does it say?
It says, for all these 40 years, your clothes didn't wear out and your feet didn't blister or swell. Think about it. Just as a parent disciplines a child, the Lord your God disciplines you for your own good.
That's a long time to have the same clothes.
Ooh, just absolutely.
Yes. And one thing I was looking up, and I haven't been able to find it yet, because any biblical studies that I've seen on video shows the people, and I thought there were about 1 million, but other theologians say up to 2 million. That's a lot of folk to be walking in a circle, kind of like you're walking on a track. But I haven't been able to find what they did when they were not assembled for worship. So if I find that, I will pass that on to everyone. Another thing that I was curious about was last time we met, I named the 12 tribes that formed the 12 tribes of Egypt, of Israel. And I was trying to remember if I knew what tribe Moses came from. And what I found was that he and Aaron were from the tribe of Levi, which was the tribe of the clergy. So he and Aaron are from that tribe. And they did not get a spot of land. Each certain portions of that tribe were distributed to live in the land of other people. And so just about everything they did, the Levites participated in it. And they were ordered to share their fortune with the Levites, with the clergy. Okay, any comments on that? Or questions? Chapter 26, it's talking about first fruits. So this is where we get that phrase, first fruits. You plant your crops, and as soon as they sprout, you share a portion, and that portion is usually 10%. Now, I don't muddy the water, but do you count what and say, oh, this goes to God? How do you do it? And people have asked me in our economy, what does 10% mean? Does it mean 10% of your gross or 10% of your net? And so I'm thinking, and I could be good and wrong, is 10% of what you have available to you. That's what you give to God, which would be 10% of your net. And every 3 years, they are required to share their crops with the widows, the foreigners, which surprised me, and the Levites, and the fatherless, which is the first time I saw them mention the fatherless. Every year, they were required by law to pay this 10% tithe, but every 3 years, or they really break things down. Every 3 years, they had to share their property or give a tithe of their property to those groups, the Levites. Part of it went to the temple or to the poor. Now, I've been saying there was only one temple, and that's in Jerusalem. But while they were in the wilderness, that temple really represented where they worshiped. I was in a study one time with how can these people make a worship site, an altar, and all the things that go with it. And what we found in the study was that God equipped them to do what he needed for them to do. For example, where they set up their worship site, they had different colors. I don't know if that sounds familiar, for the different times that they worship. So God equipped people to be able to dye things like purple or red. I'm not sure about the green, but I really do remember the purple and the red. And their altar that they set up where the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant was very colorful. And the clergy had to wear those different colors for the different times that they worship. So all of our liturgical denominations follow that same theme. And in my other study, I found that God equipped people who were wandering in the wilderness. He equipped them with the gift of being able to sow. And to me, the theme is that God will provide where he guides. And they already had gold and silver and bronze that was given to them by the Egyptians, who were saying, good riddance, get away from here. We don't want to see you again. Take this with you. And so the tabernacle was made of gold and bronze. I don't think it was made of silver, but it was a beautiful structure. And it was given to them, just thrown at them for their taking when they fled Egypt. Okay, and when they were told that when they got to the promised land and the land would be divided so that each tribe could have a plot of land, within that plot, they give over 10% of that property. And part of that 10% would go to the clergy that were assigned to them. Okay, chapter 27. After they were told that after they crossed the Jordan, they were to divide the land, and that they should gather up 2 mountains. And this was strange, I thought, but it had meaning. The 2 mountains were designated, and the tribes were split. Half the tribes would be at one mountain, and the other half would be at the other mountain. So it was split up with Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin. And then the other group would be Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan and Naphtali. And so Moses read and a list of curses and blessings that would happen to them if they disobeyed. They would be harm would come to them. But I just noted a few of the things because the details were just overwhelming. One sound just like one of the commandments. You would be cursed if you disobeyed your parents. And it was written such as father and mother. If you moved your boundary, now they had some way of dividing the land, and each tribe knew where their land ended and where it began. I thought about my neighbors that live behind me because this house is on about a third of an acre, but I don't have a fence on all the sides. My husband was against having fences, so I begged and begged him. And so the neighbors behind us have a real small backyard, but for some reason they know where their boundary is. I'm not sure if I know where it is, but I know when the people come to spray the yard, they know where to stop. Maybe Jeff told them. And my yard man knows where to stop. He knows which boundary is mine and which boundary is theirs. So so far, I don't have any disputes with them. And as a protection, they were told, what their boundary was and to recognize it. And they were told to honor each person and not cross the boundaries. And then it got kind of kinky in what they should not do. It said, sleep with your father's wife. Now, that could mean your mother. Or, well, who is your father's wife? Or it could mean that your father had several wives and you slept with one and that one was not your mother. Or it could mean that was your mother. So,
wow.
But the way it was written, it seemed like everybody knew that the men had more than one wife. So, and maybe one of those was your mother and one was not. Because even in the tribes, Jacob, who later became Israel, had the 12 sons, but he also had 4 wives. And so using him as an example, it says, do not sleep with your father's wife. So don't sleep with any of your stepmothers. Or don't sleep with your mother. Another one that stood out to me was, you should not have sex with animals.
Yeah, I know. It's like I saw these and I'm like, gosh, how did they know to come up with this stuff
yes.
back then? Do you know what I mean? I'm like,
Yeah,
a lot of detail.
Yes.
believe it or not, I had never, being in social work, I was in social work for part of my career with the state. And part of that, I was in foster care. And those were some of the most broken children and families I had ever seen. And there was one kid out in Baker County. And back then, this was in the 70s, Baker was just a remote, barren land. And there was one kid whose files showed that he lived on a farm, but he was having sex as a kid with the animals on the farm.
Oh, wow.
And one of the animals was a chicken.
Oh my gosh. Gosh, oh my
I'm like,
God.
how can that happen?
I know. Oh my God. Oh boy.
So, but
Wow.
I didn't know about Deuteronomy then, but God knew how his creation was.
Yeah.
And, it sounds perverted to us, but
Mhm.
people do those things. And
Wow.
it's just terrible.
Yeah.
And they were told not to sleep with their sister, the daughter of their father. Now, that might be your sister, or it might be your stepsister.
Golly.
Who knows? Don't sleep with your mother-in-law. Now, that could be one person or many. And do not kill your neighbor. Now, I thought most of those were gross, but I just made a note of the ones that stood out for me. But God knew his people.
Yeah. When I read it, I was amazed at the detail of even having it in this book, meaning it was even in this, how he, because I don't know. I just found it interesting that how would he know back then, if that makes sense?
Yeah,
Something I wouldn't have thought of.
God knows all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the book is so detailed, and too much detail can be boring. And but God knew his people, he made them. So Delta, are you there?
Yes. Mhm.
Oh, okay. Just
Yes.
want to make sure. Okay, and that was chapter 27. Do you all have any questions on that one?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
Then they were told over and over in the book of Deuteronomy, if you obey God, you will be blessed.
Yeah.
If you disobey God, curses will come upon you. And some of those curses sound like what happened to Job. And then some of them did not. One is if you disobeyed, that God would send confusion. And, I was thinking, boy, could that be us?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we're at a stalemate. Norma, I don't know if you read the latest from the Standing Committee, but they're going to send a female bishop to give pastoral care for us.
Oh,
Wait a
I
minute.
have read that. I have read the ones where they had just sent out for you to sign if you were, still in agreement with the new elected co-adjudicator. This to me has just become so divisional in our church. It just makes
It
me
is.
sick.
Yeah, that's why I was saying confusion. And
Yeah.
part of it is not confusion, in my opinion, is political, because some of the dissenters, many of them are from big churches.
Mm.
and they give heavily to the diocese.
Ah,
Very,
So
I think it's
will
very political, very.
might not pay attention.
So sad.
Yeah, so, but did we do something wrong?
Yeah, they're not listening to the majority.
Um,
They care about themselves.
it looks that way, yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you disobey God, you would be struck with a disease. And that's why I thought about Job. He had these
Yeah.
balls or whatever all over his body, yet he didn't do anything.
That's what
Another
say.
curse,
Did anything, did he? He was
yeah,
being
no,
tested.
yeah, he was being tested, but this is saying you will have some of the disasters that happened to Job. And
Oh,
as a sidebar, where Job is placed in the Bible is not exactly where when the book was written. It's believed that Job was one of the first books that was written after they crossed over into the promised land.
oh,
Yeah, you keep flipping, and oh, here's Job kind of in the middle. It's more like in the beginning, but the Bible is not set up according to when the information was written.
hmm.
We are used to that because that's our culture, but their culture is not that way. Because even, for example, with the Gospels, we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, it's believed that Mark was written first, and Matthew and Luke copied off of him. But the way it's placed in the Bible is Matthew first. We're in the season of Matthew, but Matthew copied off of Mark. And it makes it seem like Mark copied off of Matthew, but that's not the way it is. They will be defeated by enemies. Now, that's what happened to that nation as a whole. What's left is Israel. But with the 12 tribes, their land extended beyond what is left. And there was a dispute, and those tribes split into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And first, the northern kingdom was invaded by the Assyrians. And so they mingled with them and took up their ways of worship and everything. And the ones that were in the northern kingdom, some of them were Samaritans. And that's why the Jews and the Samaritans don't get along. They are cousins, but their tribes did not obey God. And the southern kingdom was invaded by Babylon. And that's the kingdom that Jesus came from, the tribe, rather, of Judah. So if they disobey God, enemies will be sent to them, like Assyria and Babylon. And their children will be captives. And like what happened to Egypt, locusts will swarm the land. Boy, seems to me enough information was given to scare them, but it didn't. temptation was just so great. Okay, any comments or questions?
Mm-mm.
In chapter 29, Moses went over the covenant. Now, part of your homework, even though this will be over, is after I get into the Eucharistic prayer, so that'll be after the offertory. And I will probably say the service continues with Eucharistic prayer A,
Mhm,
found on page whatever, 361.
mhm.
And somewhere in there, I will mention the new covenant. So listen for the new covenant. God made several covenants with the people of Israel. When Jesus came, he became the new covenant. That's why if you read, you shouldn't do this, and like women shouldn't dress like men, and men shouldn't dress like women. Well, when Jesus came along, that covenant just basically disappeared. And I couldn't find what the men were wearing during that time anyway. Were they wearing the long gowns, or did they have on pants underneath them? I don't know. But even with the Muslim religion, uh, they wear each other's clothes, so to speak. The women can wear pants. And so Jesus came with a new covenant. And in his covenant, those who have faith in him have accepted the new covenant, which is more, it may seem more liberal than the old covenant, because if we had to abide by all these things, I don't know, I would be, for, I would forget it. Because sometimes I head to one room in my house and I'm like, well, why was I headed this way? Now I understand why in this book, Moses kept repeating, if you do this, and he lists those things, you will live. And if you don't, you will be cursed. But that's still a lot to absorb. And the idea is that people could not keep that law, which
Mhm.
was so detailed. And Jesus came not to abolish the law, but to say, I can do what you cannot do. You cannot do all those things that Moses told them to do, but Jesus can. So when we have faith in him, we know that he is a blessing to us because he can do what we cannot do.
Hmm.
Okay, and another thing I did not think of, maybe too hard, was between Egypt and the Red Sea. After they crossed the Red Sea, Scripture says they stopped in the wilderness. Well, was it a clean walk through the wilderness, or what happened? And what I found was that historians believe that people who lived in the land that they were crossing wanted to capture them. And there was a war. with the different people that lived in those lands, even in the wilderness lands. It wasn't just vacant property. People lived there. But Moses was reminding them that their enemies in those lands were conquered through the help of God. And you need to remember this. And in this chapter, it said Moses wrote this down. But how? What? And he passed this information on to each tribe. Well, how? I mean, what was it written on? What did he use to write the law? To make maybe 12 copies. Now I'm just saying copies because I'm in contemporary times. Did he write all this stuff 12 times and gave it to each tribe? It assumes that you know how he wrote this and what instrument did he use to write this. And he must have written this in Hebrew, which if you've ever seen Hebrew, you would say, I give up. We were given a choice when we went to seminary to sign up for Greek or Hebrew. And the bishop told me to take Greek because all of the Gospels were written in Greek. And most clergy will be preaching from the Gospels. And so Greek will help me. So I figured, okay, I know the Greek alphabet. I was Miss Thane. And you know, just because I knew, you know, from Alpha to Omega. And by the way, that's the symbol that's on our Paschal candle. And Alpha, which looks like an A, and an Omega, which looks like a horseshoe, beginning and end. Well, I thought since I knew the entire Greek alphabet, Greek would be for me. And plus the bishop said, take it. But we had a day in a Hebrew class. And in Hebrew, for example, all of their vowels are dots. And so you have to look at where the vowels are placed, because really some of their words don't even have vowels in them. But, you know, I didn't research it, why they do that, because I wanted to get out of the class. But it's a beautiful language. But if you ever have a chance to take Hebrew, it's like a poetic language. And a lot of our words a lot of their words cannot be interpreted into our words. But their writings are like lines. And you have to look at the way the lines are pointed and look where the dots are. And I said, oh boy, I was cross-eyed when I left that one class. So that's what Moses wrote. And, you know, you might be thinking maybe he wrote it like we write, but our language is different. So, no, I think that's a spam call. But if I find out how he was able to write down the covenant, which was an agreement with them, and give it to each tribe, I'll let you know. The old covenant started with Abraham when he agreed to be circumcised. And then there were other agreements made between Abraham and God. And the 10 Commandments were another covenant, and they had several covenants that they had to abide by. And so Moses wrote down some of the covenants, or maybe he wrote all of them. And I have to admit, the Jewish people were excellent in preserving their history. And I would imagine if I saw this movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, yeah.
I
Mhm.
don't know if you all saw it.
Yes.
Yet Greek people were, according to the movie, were required to send their children to a Greek school so they could learn their culture and different things about them as a people. And so I was wondering if the Jews had the same requirement, that they either teach their children at home, and I'm thinking at home, or to a special school where they could learn. And I think at their bar mitzvah, that's when they get a lot of information about who they are.
I
And
think they have to perform or do a reading, if
yes,
I'm not mistaken, right?
yes. And it should be in Hebrew.
Right.
Boy, it's a wonder. There's this Black female comedian who I think she's really funny, but she said she's Jewish, and every time she says
Oh,
it,
gosh.
people laugh at her.
She, I
But
know who you're talking about.
yeah, I can't think of her name. But
Tiffany. Tiffany
yeah,
something.
Tiffany. Yeah, when she okay, yeah, that's it. And when she had her bar mitzvah, she invited all her friends, and they were like, "You Jewish?"
She claims to be Jewish.
Yeah, she does. And you would have to, go through classes and things like that to accept it, and then you have your formal acceptance through the bar mitzvah.
Let me ask you a question, Carrie. And
Okay.
you talked about in this new covenant, and I can't remember who you said, but he decided to be circumcised.
Yeah, Abraham.
So Abraham. So what is the big deal with that what is the deal with that for? Because I know a lot of Jewish men, I don't know. I think really it's the parents in today's world that circumcise, and some parents choose not to. Is that?
Well, in the Jewish culture, and I'm glad you asked that, that is a must.
Right.
To this day, when my first child was born in 1977, and his pediatrician was a Jewish doctor, and he highly recommended that he be circumcised. And I talked to my mother about it, and back then we didn't have any pediatricians. We just had a doctor that did everything. But he recommended that my brothers be circumcised. And so that's part of the agreement to distinguish you from people who did not agree to accept God as their Lord and the one who they would be following. And
Got it. Okay.
in with Paul was sent to the Gentiles to make them believers of Jesus. And Paul got involved in a dispute because the Jews said if they're going to follow Jesus, they have to be circumcised. And Paul gave them the what for. He read the rights to them and said, no, circumcision was part of the old covenant. Under Jesus, followers do not have to be circumcised. And I could see him dropping his mic saying whatever. But yeah, that's the way they identified as being God's own.
Okay.
And the reason I'm glad you brought it up, because Moses fled Egypt shortly after he was told and figured out that he was not an Egyptian, he was really Jewish. And he had met his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam. And so he fled to an area that was inhabited by Moabites. And they rescued him from whatever wilderness he was in. And it was there, while he stayed with his family, that he saw the burning bush that was not consumed on a mountain. Well, he fell in love with the oldest girl in that tribe, and her name was Zipporah. And her father married Moses and Zipporah, but they were not Jewish people. And so they had 2 sons. Now they may have had daughters, but they didn't count women. And so when Moses went to Egypt to rescue his people, as the story goes, it was discovered that the son that they had at that time had not been circumcised. And according to the story, Zipporah, the wife, who was not Jewish, took a knife and circumcised the oldest son so that he could mingle in with his father's people.
Wow.
But
how old was he?
I hope he was a baby. I don't know. So
I'm cringing.
yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Now that's not in scripture. When I get some information like that, it's from reading what Jewish writers have written that's not in scripture. And there was this Jewish historian called Josephus. He collected a lot of treasures. And that was one of the treasures that he had. And I found it because I wanted to know about Zipporah. Not being Jewish, did she go with Moses to Egypt? Apparently she would have stood out, because there are 2 versions of her. Somebody asked, well, what did Moses look like? And this Josephus said he had dark hair and blue eyes. And he looked Jewish, though. But some believe that he had 2 wives, and one wife was Ethiopian, which meant she was African. And some people said, well, that wasn't that was Zipporah that had the dark skin. But either way, disappears out of the picture. And it's believed that Moses sent her away for her safety and their son's safety. Because she decided to keep her son safe. She would go ahead and circumcise him.
Oh.
So I don't think he wasn't old enough to slap her.
Right.
But anyway,
Mm.
that's just a little side story that I picked up. Okay, thank you for that question. And then on chapter 30, Moses talks about the prosperity they would have after turning to God. And I meant to look this term up, circumcise their hearts. God will circumcise their hearts. I'm thinking that means everyone will know that they belong to the God of Israel, that he is their God. And I think early on, someone asked me, well, how come this group of people was chosen as God's people? And well, God is more knowledgeable than we are. And it was basically because God tested Abraham in a land where they had several gods. Abraham was the one in that land who believed there's only one God, and God tested him. And you all may know the story of after Abraham, who was old, and Sarah had their first child, Isaac, something they had waited for years. Then God told him to take Isaac up to a spot and to kill him. And he listened, and he didn't question God. He went by stepping out on faith. And as he raised his hand to slay his son, who was pretty big by then, he looked and saw a ram in the bush. And the ram was really a prototype for Jesus, who came to be slain for us. But God knew that he could trust Abraham. And so with that trust, he made all of Abraham's descendants blessed and made them his people. However, they were human. And so they did get naughty every once in a while. And Moses told them, and by them, I mean, this was a new group of people. People didn't live much beyond 40 years. And another reason why this seems so redundant is Moses is telling this new group of people, if you obey God, you will be blessed. If you disobey God, you will be cursed. And you see that theme over and over again. And he was trying to get it imprinted in the people's minds because their older generation saw him come down the mountain with the 10 Commandments that God wrote with his finger on these two pieces of stone. The young people didn't see that. And, they may not even have believed it. How could God write something with his finger on some tablets? And how do we know it's true? that if we obey, we'll have life, and if we disobey, we'll have death. So that's why you see over and over that Moses is repeating these things. Okay, and so that's what chapter 30 is like, that you will be prosperous in turning to God. Now, prosperity might mean different things to different people. Now, a lot of clergy and theologians don't like to listen to those prosperity ministers like Joel Osteen.
Right.
But I listen to him, especially when I'm down and out. I mean, I said, you know, I know better, but there is some truth into what he's saying. But his idea of prosperity is material.
Yeah.
And prosperity doesn't have to always be material. When I think of him, I think of when I grew up as a child. And by the time I was 14, my family moved into a house that my father built. And he was one of those kind of people that was good at everything. So we moved into this house, and after we moved in, he wanted to make some changes. So he made it a split level.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
nobody in that neighborhood had a split level house but us. And then he added on to the back. And then he decided to rent out the upstairs. And so in order to accommodate the people who rented, he had several parking spaces for them on the property.
Wow.
So the property took up a lot of space. It was a big house. And right in front of us, there was a family, and I don't know how many people lived in that house. I know one of the ladies that lived there had a set of triplets.
Whoa.
And she had an older child. And there were other people. I think one was my classmate, but we didn't talk to each other. But people thought that we were rich. But this family, they would come outside and have the music going, and they would be eating and they would be celebrating. And so I asked my mother, how come that family that's very poor is always having fun? They're always laughing and talking and just enjoying themselves. And we don't do that.
Oh, wow.
And she said their definition of prosperity is not everybody's definition of prosperity. Prosperity doesn't mean that you have all these material things. Yeah, I learned a lot from those people. And the one that was in my class, I think I knew her name, but I didn't say much to her. That's a shame. But anyway, and their house was always falling, you know, was leaning. But they didn't care. They would just be so happy and go lucky. Ooh, Lord, have mercy. And right next to them was another poor family. And when the mother in the family, who was a widow, they moved in the neighborhood shortly after we did. Well, she told her oldest daughter, there are two boys in that family. get to know one of them.
Oh, funny.
So you could have you won't have to work. You'll have a rich husband.
Oh, wow.
That's funny.
Well, my brother did marry her.
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. That's the brother that took me to all of my treatments.
wow.
Oh my
Oh,
Yeah. And
Did
he's
he
doing,
stay married to her?
huh?
Did he stay married to her?
Well, now that you ask, he waited till their youngest child graduated from college and he divorced her.
Oh, wow.
And they stayed divorced for 13 years. But he was still in contact with her. If she needed any repairs around the house, he would go and blah, blah. And in the divorce, he gave her the house.
Oh, wow.
Um, after 13 years of being divorced, they contacted me and told me they were going to get remarried and asked me if I would marry them. And I said yes.
wow.
Wow.
So they sold their 2 houses and bought the house they're in now.
Wow.
And she couldn't be happier.
No.
Well, did she have to work, Carrie?
No, she tried to get a job as a teacher, but you have to pass that test that they give them.
Yeah.
And she couldn't. So
Mm.
she just worked in the office at the school is now called Westside High School. I can't remember what it was when she was working there.
Wow.
Yep. So, but the poorest family on the block was the most prosperous, in my opinion. Just a
Wow.
loving family.
Mm.
Okay, chapter 31. And it goes from Moses doing all the talking about what they should and should not do to Moses saying, first of all, that he was 120 years old and that he couldn't lead the people anymore. And he was turning over the leadership to Joshua. Now, when Moses wrote this, he assumed that people had read back in Leviticus and Numbers, because why did they end up in the wilderness in the first place? These were people who had been under horrific conditions, who the Pharaoh, the meaner he got, the more prosperous they got in terms of having children. And the Israelites were outnumbering the Egyptians. And so in order, in his mind, to keep them straight, he made them slaves, and their labor was real hard. And so God sent Moses after them being slaves for more than 400 years.
Wow.
And so Moses came along, who grew up as an Egyptian prince, but I'm thinking they should have known that he looked different. But anyway, that was the work of God, and that's the way he sent Moses to them. Well, in this story in Deuteronomy, they're on the edge of the Jordan River, and they're going to and the older generation all died out. And that includes Aaron. So God told Moses to select 10 people to be spies and to go and look around, but don't be seen at the promised land, and to come back and tell the people what they saw. Now, there is a little side story about that, but I'll mention it later. And so those 10 men came back, and 8 of the 10 said, we can't go there. God told us that he was going to give us this land. Now, we can't go there and take it. Those people are so big that we look like grasshoppers compared to them. So they came back telling Moses, no, there's no promised land. There's a conquered land if you can beat them. So they scared the people. But 2 of the 10, Joshua and Caleb, said, but God told us he would be with us. We think we should go forward. Well, God punished them by not letting that generation cross the Jordan. Now, they would have crossed it much sooner, but he told them, no, for y'all not having faith in me, that those who disobeyed will have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And once those who disobeyed died out, then y'all can cross the river. And those 8 who really scared everybody, they died of different kinds of illnesses and whatever. But Joshua and Caleb survived. So they got into the wilderness because they lost faith that God could do the impossible. After seeing dry land, after they walked through the Red Sea, boy, that in itself would make you want to, okay, God, you got, your stuff is different. You're different. But they kept falling back. And that's another reason why God sent his son, because we fall back. We try hard, but we make a mistake. And some of our mistakes can be deadly. So that's how they got into the wilderness and had to wander around for 40 years. So God must have told Moses, this is it for you. You can't go any further. And your time has come for you to die. And God told Moses to appoint Joshua as the new leader of the group. And I meant to look up what tribe Joshua was from, because Moses and Aaron were from the priestly tribe of Levi. And so they had a ceremony, kind of like an ordination, where the people gathered, and God anointed Joshua to be the leader of that group of probably 2 million people. That's a lot of folk. And that's another thing. How could all the people hear Moses? He didn't have a microphone, So whatever. And so Moses told the people that God had talked to him and that he was going to die. And when I thought about it, I said, well, Moses was 80 years old when God chose him to be the leader of the group. So don't think you're too old to do God's work. Because Moses started at age 80. And the law, there was a law given at that time when Joshua was anointed as the leader. And that law at this time, there was 3 times a year that Jewish people should gather. Wherever they are, they should gather and celebrate in Jerusalem. One is Passover, the other is the Feast of the Tabernacle. And I mentioned the third one in one of our classes, but I can't remember it now. And God told Moses to develop a song of S-O-N-G, not a P-S-A-L-M, that the people could sing that would remind them of everything that God did for them. And they were ordered to sing this song when they were about to get in trouble and be naughty. And this song would remind them of what God had done for them. And this song is in our hymn, in our prayer book.
Wow.
I don't know if anybody has it. And verse 32 is basically that particular song. But in our Book of Common Prayer, if you get a chance, page 85, and it's in the morning prayer, and you have different hymns or psalms that you could read. You read one time and then another time in the service. And the one on page 85 is the Song of Moses. When I compared what's written as the Song of Moses in chapter 31, it was, well, maybe our interpretation was different, but it was different from what's in the Book of Common Prayer. But the idea is the same. This is where we were. We were slaves. God brought us through. God cared for us. It's Moses' way of bringing them back to God by them singing this song after he was gone. So if you get a chance, you will look at the Song of Moses. And Norma, I'm sure there's music for that. When I was in seminary, when we get to these songs, we would sing them. And there's one song that I don't sing it, but I repeat it at some burials, and it's a song of Simeon. And Simeon was one of the brothers, one of the 12 sons. And it was like, Lord, now let your servant depart in peace according to your word, for mine eyes have seen the glory of our Lord. And it's a beautiful ending to a burial service. And some of our clergy put that in with every burial, but it's a song of Simeon called the Nunc Dimittis. But that's what chapter 31 is about.
Carrie, I looked up on the web. It said that Joshua was the leader in the tribe of Ephraim.
Oh, he was from Ephraim. Okay.
Said he wasn't the chief, but he was a leader in the tribe.
Yeah, he was one of the 10. So they must have seen his leadership role. Yeah. That's good to know. I'll tell my grandson. His name is Joshua.
Oh.
Strong name. Joshua James. James
Oh,
is New
nice.
Testament. So in his love, God made it possible for the people to remember their covenant with him, their agreement with him. And the agreement was, you obey, you'll be prosperous, and you disobey, destruction will come. And so there is this song, the Song of Moses. Okay, and then verse 32, most theologians believe that this was not written by Moses. This is when Moses died on Mount Nebo. And God told Moses, you disobeyed, and you can't go either, just like Aaron disobeyed. And the idea of their disobedience, and it was a major thing. If you pretend to be God, that's a sin. That's definitely a sin. And back some time before this event, God told Moses to strike this rock because the people were whining. We don't have any water. You brought us here. You brought us here to die. And so Moses interceded for the people and said, these stiff-necked people, now they want water. So God told him where to go and to hit the rock. And so what the scripture doesn't say is he should have said in the name of God or something, so that the people would know that the water came through God, not through him hitting the rock. But no excuses for that, because everything he did, he said in the name of God or Yahweh, whoever God was to the people. So the people knew that all of the miracles came from God, not from Moses. But in this one incident, Moses disobeyed. So in his mercy, God let Moses see the promised land. And maybe I should say lands, because it was a lot of property. Now, one of the writers of Israelite history said that when Moses went up on the mountain, he was in such tears because they had made it that far. He had a new generation, and they were going to be in the land of milk and honey. Everything was going to be very good for them, and yet he couldn't go. And so somebody must have told this theologian that's how Moses reacted to knowing that he was not going to go to the promised land.
It's sad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had to process that because Moses suffered a lot. And to do what he did, and you know, you don't hear about his wife after that. What happened to her? One theologian said he married another lady, but that wasn't uncommon for those days. Men had more than one wife. And that's why this theologian said this second wife was an Ethiopian who accepted the laws of the Israelites. And so before he died, he gave the people a blessing. And that's what chapter 32 is about. And he blessed each tribe separately. And apparently he started with Reuben, who was the oldest son, and then just went down all the way down to, not to Joseph, because Joseph's two sons filled in for the Levites and for Joseph. So if any of you all ever look at the 10 Commandments during this Easter season, because they show it every year, but I'm not sure if they said the 10 Commandments or what. Every year I see something different in the movie where Charleston Heston plays Moses. And so here they are leaving Egypt. This is after the Passover. And you all know the Passover is the time when they had the Seder meal, and the blood of the lamb is put on every Jewish household, including some people that were not Jewish, but that had been their friends. And Moses's mother ran to his house because she was not Jewish. And they had this meal, and they were told, if the bread didn't rise, don't wait for it to rise. Leave with the bread as it is. And so that's why the Jews have this special bread, the unleavened bread that they use. In some churches, they only have communion with unleavened bread. And we use the round wafers. But some churches reenact that part of the Eucharist with the unleavened bread, and they break it into pieces. And when the angel of death came looking for the firstborn of every household, the angel passed over the households that had the blood of the lamb over it. And during that time, while they were eating the lamb, whose blood saved them, they would be singing songs and celebrating their Passover. Well, the next day, the horns blew, and all the people gathered together, the millions of them, to leave Egypt. And Moses was up front, and then Aaron, and they started singing as they were leaving. Well, somebody stopped and said, Joseph, we've got to get Joseph's bones. Joseph was the youngest son of Jacob, also known as Israel. And it was because of Joseph that they ended up in Israel. from where they had been safe until a drought came. So if you look at the commandments, just before they get to the Red Sea,
Mhm.
they're still leaving Egypt. They're going to say, we need to get Joseph's bones.
Hmm.
That part got me some extra points in my Exodus class. So, it's kind of like, it doesn't stand out. Okay, so Moses blesses all of the tribes, and he must have just been boohoo crying.
Mm.
Hmm.
And then chapter 34, we're told that after seeing the promised land, God buried Moses, yet no one knows where he was buried, except that he was buried on that mountain, but the exact spot, no one knows.
Hmm.
And they said he was the greatest leader of all the Jewish leaders. And he was the only man to have seen God face to face. And if you read scripture, we're told that no man can see God face to face and live. And yet this is written there at the end of Deuteronomy. And what happened was Moses was in the presence of God, but he did not actually see God, or he saw God and didn't know that was him. I did a report where they said Moses met with God face to face. And Moses asked to see God. And so God said, I think it's in Exodus, stand here by this rock, and I will pass before you. And but all you will see will be my hind parts, and that means my back side. And so in the report, I told the class, Moses left us hanging. He didn't even tell us what the hind parts were like that he saw. But if you read that scripture, it said that God covered his eyes as, the front of him was passing by. And so he uncovered him when the hind parts were there. And so some theologians believe that in that encounter, Moses saw a whole lot of things. But we don't know exactly what he saw. On the mountain, he just saw fire. And on another occasion, he just saw smoke. And so, but it said in the book, no one who is alive has seen God face to face but Moses. There's this lady on TV, Tamron Hall. She named her son. She named her only child Moses. And when I heard that, I said, I hope she knows what that means. That's it's like in the Hispanic culture, a lot of people name their children Jesus, which is Jesus. So, and I think Tamron's husband is Jewish, so Moses was probably an appropriate name. Okay, ladies, that's it. And the next book in the Bible is Joshua. So, and I used to not like that book because they're always fighting, but they're fighting the people that live in the land that God gave to them.
Well, it's been really good, Carrie. Very, very informative.
Yep.
Yes.
And a lot nicer, not when you tell about it than reading it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
you know, I hate to go to a Bible study and somebody will read a line or two, and then the leader will say, well, Norma, interpret that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no.
My
Yeah.
thing is, you came for me to give you my knowledge about
Yeah.
it and
Yes.
make it contemporary.
Yes.
Well,
I think I mentioned that to you, Carrie. When I would read something and I'm like, I don't know how you made that, you know, and applied it into your life, which then makes it, you know, helps you understand it.
Yeah, I learned that when I was in seminary, we had two teachers for preaching, and one was old. Now she might have been my age. I was in my 60s, so and the other one was a spry young lady, probably in her 30s or 40s, and everybody wanted to go to the young lady. So the school decided that we could not select who we had for that class. So they assign you to one or the other. And I was assigned to the old lady. And I was so mad. And so I looked around and it was my friends that were also old like me. So they divided us by age. She was real prudish. You never talk about yourself when you're preaching. And I mean, like, what?
Uh,
Yeah, but sometimes people can relate to
Yeah.
something when you make it very personable.
right.
Now, she did say, and especially don't talk about yourself when you're the victor.
Mm.
No, you got to tell where you failed, where you messed up. So,
It lets us know you're human, Carrie.
Yeah.
yes.
And how we apply it in our life.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny reading this and looking at what's going on in today's world.
Mm.
Goodness day. I feel like we're somewhere in this craziness of,
Yeah. Scary.
yeah, yes.
Yeah, these are scary times.
Yeah.
Kim, when I was coming along, we were afraid of the Russians. And
Yeah.
we thought, especially in Florida, because we stick out on the
Yeah.
map. We
Yeah.
have all these military towns
Yeah.
that if they invaded somebody, it would be Florida. So we would have these drills.
Yeah.
And when the sound came, we would get out of our desk and get under the desk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we thought, you know, when we think back on it, that was mighty stupid. If the Russians were going to bomb us, how could getting under your desk help you?
Exactly.
But we had those drills. Did you have them, Norma?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. And so now they have these other drills. And it's so sad.
Yeah. It is. It's very, you know, I didn't have that when I went to school. So I don't relate, you know, the only thing we had was a fire drill. you know,
Right.
when you would have to
Yeah.
get out of your school and go in single line, and but we never had like they have now, the active shooter role or
No.
anything like that. I mean, you know, back then you know, you might have a fist fight every once in a while,
Yeah.
but it really wasn't that. I don't remember it being that much. We
And
just,
they also respected the teachers.
thank you very much so.
Do that
Yeah,
now.
that is, you know, it's so funny. I think when they took God out of the schools,
Yes.
things went, we've really messed up. That's,
Yeah.
I,
Me too.
and just, and everywhere, it just, you know, and I think I'm seeing it being, trying to be reinserted in these times right now, is what I'm
Yeah.
seeing a lot of. Or, you know, trying to get God back in.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it really made a difference.
Yes.
Yeah, well, one of the themes in Deuteronomy is that God will be with you, but you need to bring him along.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they were told, or Moses told the people that God will lead you across the Jordan. And what happened was this Ark of the Covenant crossed the Jordan first. It was the first one in line of all the people crossing the Jordan. And the Ark of the Covenant was this nice size box, but it was beautiful because it was gold and bronze and silver. I think it was silver, very heavy. And it had the 10 Commandments in it. It had Aaron's staff and it had manna. And everywhere they moved in the desert, that ark with God in it led the way, and it led the way into the promised land. Now, when we have service next week on Maundy Thursday, the altar guild will strip the altar because we'll be getting ready for Good Friday, the day that Jesus was crucified. And I'm going to take the reserved sacrament, that is the blood, which is the wine, and the body, which is the bread, take them out of that tabernacle. And our replica tabernacle is on the altar and it has a light above it. And
Yeah.
then I'll unplug the light and open the tabernacle. And that means that Jesus is no longer with us.
Mm.
So, and that's one of those services where we leave in silence.
Mm-hmm. I know
So,
that just made me silent just thinking about that. Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, well, Delta, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. You have any comments?
No, the only thing I think I'm either going to go look for Babel or Rosetta Stone tomorrow for Hebrew lessons. I'm only kidding.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
oh.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
Hebrew was, it was to me a difficult language, but then Greek was even more difficult
Mm.
because in Greek there are no punctuation marks. There's
Oh.
Mm.
no period, no comma, no dash, no nothing.
Mm.
Mm.
So can you imagine trying to read what Paul said with his long sentences? That, you know, the whole passage was one long passage. It could be a paragraph, but no punctuation marks.
My grandson used to be absolutely horrible. He would write paragraphs and there would be no periods.
Oh,
He's so much better.
Wow.
But when he was a teenager, even a young adult, he's 34 now, but even as a young adult, he would do that. It's, Michael, why are you keep doing this? But he's been forced into having to make a change.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so both languages give us a broader interpretation. Just like I told y'all in church that Sunday when Jesus found out that Lazarus was dead, and King James said Jesus wept, and the NIV says Jesus began to weep. But in Greek, it said Jesus cried his eyeballs out.
Oh, wow.
He was screaming and hollering and just, it was the kind of cry that you cry when you lose someone you really loved.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's why they wanted us to take Greek, so we could look at their interpretation of the word. Okay, ladies, so this is it. I learned a lot myself. So your homework is when I do the Eucharistic prayer,
Yes.
listen for me to say the new covenant.
Yeah.
And I would say part of the new covenant is, and Norma and I talked about it, we worship God on Sunday, which is our Sabbath. Okay, so well, Sunday we will walk around the nave and we will have people reading those assigned parts. So if there are no questions or comments, then I will see you all Sunday.
Sounds good. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you very much. Thank
And
you.
have a good rest of the week.
Okay, thank you. Same to
too.
you.
Get some rest.
Yes.
I will.
Okay. I'm
Take
going to go.
Okay. Take care and be blessed.
Thank you.
Good night.
You too,
Good
Mary.
night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.